Hey everyone, this is Thyworm and today let's talk about Torchlight 3. Enjoying action RPG content? Consider subscribing. I have played Torchlight since the alpha and because of an NDA I was not allowed to make content about it. I've bought the game a few days ago in early access on Steam to see how it changed from alpha to beta. Not much is the answer. I've played the early access for around 12 hours and finished the campaign with a single character, the Dusk Mage. I did that on my stream on twitch.tv/Thyworm where I stream every Monday, Thursday and Saturday 8 PM Central European Time. And in this video, expect an extensive look at the game's features, its current issues, and then I will tell you, you probably don't want to buy this game. I don't hate this game, I thought it was sort of fine, but in its current state, it's not worth 30 euros. And it's very questionable if it will be worth 30 euros in its future state at launch. Let's introduce the game and talk a little bit about the history. So, what is Torchlight? Torchlight 3 is a hack and slash action RPG currently in early access. It is available for 30 bucks as I said, and it has had quite the journey. From a free-to-play model back when the game was still called Torchlight Frontiers to a buy-to-play game with the name Torchlight 3. Should you be a fan of the original series, Torchlight 1 and 2, which are very beloved games, then you're out of luck. Torchlight 3 bleaks in comparison. The free-to-play vibes are very much in the DNA of Torchlight 3 and the legacy of its predecessors is almost nowhere to be found. It lacks depth and refinement across the board. There is nothing there that suggests that two excellent games have preceded this one, apart from similar graphics, a pet, and the number 3 in the title. There is no offline mode, there are no mods, no rings, amulets, there's no depth, no soul, and most of what made the previous games so great is missing. But what does it have? Well, let's see. Starting with graphics and sound and performance. This is pretty good. I don't mind the colorful vibes as its predecessors had a similar palette. Sounds are generally spot on and kinda comical with the exception of the voice acting. You're watching a placeholder cinematic, but if this is the final voice acting, and I have no reason to believe this isn't the final voice acting, it's cringe even for a Torchlight game.
Yes, Mother, it is. And I'll show you just how incredible it is. When I use it to eviscerate this intruder.
Yeah, there are very few graphical options, just a few generic settings and that's it. I wouldn't expect many options either, it's fine. Currently, the left mouse button isn't rebindable, making you always attack enemies. That can be a deal breaker honestly for some and it is extremely annoying. Performance was generally okay from a frame rate perspective, but loading times were somehow rather long, with this being installed on an M2 hard drive. Movement is click to move. Now that we get the technicalities out of the way, let's take a look at the classes in Torchlight 3. The game has 4 available classes, each with their own kit. You have a sharpshooter, who is a ranged class that can summon pets. There is the Real Master, a really original class that can summon a train to follow you around in battle. There's the Forged, a robot that has close-up melee combat or ranged forged attacks. And there's the Dusk Mage, which I've played a lot, who wields dark and light magic and uses both powers to dish out damage. It is a diverse and colorful bunch. The classes have 2 skill trees, although calling these skill trees is pushing it. Let's say you can roughly go in 2 directions with each character. The Dusk Mage, for example, has dark and light magic. The Ranger, on the other hand, specializes in ranged attacks or can summon pets. You can combine the trees as well, picking from both as you level up. There are 7 available skills per tree and that is it for a total of 14 skills per character. Each skill has very minor customization because the additional points you spend into the skills don't feel very impactful at all. It is stuff usually like more damage, more projectiles or a small buff. There's nothing here that transforms the available skills into something interesting. You can respec your skills by finding respectables, which are goggles of sorts. They drop from bosses every now and then and they act like orbs of regret in Path of Exile. After using them, you get respec points. Next topic, content. There's really only one thing currently available in terms of content, so let's talk about the campaign. You take your hero through a 3-act campaign. Right now, at the start of early access, only 2 acts are available. The first act is filled with goblins that do a lot of fire damage. The second act is filled with bugs slugs and poison damage. The third act is not available but will feature lightning damage most likely. The campaign is very linear and there is zero sense of exploration. Maps are randomly generated but somehow still manage to be linear, which is an achievement I would say. The only times you need to explore is when the map sends you in the wrong direction, and the random absence of quest markers sometimes has you wandering around the zones, but usually it's all very straightforward. You encounter random bosses and elite and unique enemies on a regular basis, and those guys are the main source of your loot. However, once again, and this is a recurring theme, the bosses and enemies are extremely basic. They have only a few modifiers like Blazing or Plague Bearer or Illusionist, and there aren't many enemy types either. As a result, going through the campaign is a very repetitive exercise with little variety. I completed 2 acts and wasn't really eager to spend another 5 hours in act number 3, so I didn't mind it wasn't implemented yet. Some of the boss fights were interesting, however, with some more additional mechanics. In particular, an archer that summoned mirror images and filled the screen with arrows was a nice challenge, but generally the campaign was a breeze. I died once. That is also because the acts are simplistic in terms of damage types available. In Act 1, every enemy does fire damage, and a lot of fire protection gear drops, so you're automatically well defended in the zone that you're in. Act 2, it is exactly the same thing but then for poison. Act 3 isn't implemented yet, as I mentioned, and endgame doesn't exist. There used to be endgame in alpha, contracts for example, but that's currently disabled. There is honestly nothing to do except grind for gear and level up to level 40, doing the same maps and bosses over and over again. Replayability is currently very limited, I would say, unless you want to level another class. You will run the same linear campaign, and after completing this on one character, only the hardcore fans may be interested in leveling another toon, given the lack of character build customization. Let's take a look at the loot. What I enjoyed was the drop rate of loot. It's prevalent, it comes mainly from bosses, and you will often find small incremental upgrades. The occasional legendary item drops are exciting and definitely worth playing for. What is not so great is the loot itself. Most affixes are plain boring, granting health or the primary act's defense stats like poison or fire. Rares are somewhat interesting, but only legendaries are things to really look forward to. They offer unique synergies, they can boost skills or provide entire new interactions. It's one of the few ways you can actually change the playstyle of your character. A cool and interesting mechanic is life-bound loot. It's a little bit like soul-bound loot in World of Warcraft, but instead of binding to your character, it binds to your life. And when you die, you lose the loot. As life-bound loot is generally a lot stronger than their regular counterparts, it offers an interesting risk-reward system, where you can deck your character completely in life-bound gear and lose it all, including legendaries, when you die. There are life-bound scrolls which remove the life-bound affix, making the loot permanent. Those scrolls are however rare, so you better stay alive. It's just a shame when you die because of server lag, because this game isn't playable offline just yet. The game features set items. Usually unique legendaries are part of a set and they grant additional bonuses, as you're used to by now by playing other action RPGs. Apart from gear, you can pick up a bunch of other items. You can find a lot of crafting items, for example, like wood, stone and minerals, which can be used in your personal fort to construct buildings and decoration. The fort is definitely a remainder of the free-to-play model because it offers so much customization and it's a very mature game element. Undoubtedly one of the sources of income for their free-to-play game when that was still on the table. It's nice to play around in the fort, where you can offer loot to increase magic find chance, offer trophies from enemies to increase your resistances, enchant your weapons and armor, or respec your skills. It's just a shame that developers haven't put similar efforts into the actual gameplay elements of Torchlight 3, because that would have made it a much better game. There's more loot like relic shards, and 24 of those are used to craft a relic. There are 5 relics available and the relic offers you 5 more skills, some active, some passive. You have to choose one of the 5 relics, and I chose Bane, which focuses on poison. As you level up your relic by simply killing enemies, more skills become available. Bane lets me summon a poisonous spider, for example, and also passively I can create minions by killing poisoned enemies or shoot poisonous missiles when hitting poisoned enemies. When I toggle the relic, it activates a potent poisonous aura for 30 seconds, which really helps you kill bosses and tough elites, which tends to be rather bullet spongy. The relic system is a nice addition to the game. I wish it had more of these interesting systems to add to the depth of character build customization. A final system worth mentioning in terms of loot is the Legendarium. It has 3 slots in which you can slot one of around 120 unlockable legendary passives. You can add more legendary passives to the legendarium by disenchanting legendary gear, which is definitely a cool feature. Most of the legendary skills at the start aren't particularly original, with names like the Quicksilver and Headhunter. But still, you would think that with all these different mechanics, the game offers depth and interesting character builds, but it simply doesn't. The individual systems that fuel the building blocks of your character are simply too weak and simplistic. Skills and their modifiers are uninteresting and shallow. Additional mechanics suffer the same fate. All skill damage, skills with weapon damage only, and attributes like strength or intelligence simply don't exist in Torchlight 3. And when everything scales off of weapon damage, you just equip the strongest weapon you can find and blaze through the game. Another simplistic mechanism is block, which blocks all incoming damage completely. That means you just find a shield with high block chance and become basically invincible. While there are many systems that should impact your build, in reality the game is severely limiting builds due to design decisions. 14 skills is nothing, and 3 passives from a legendarium aren't going to change that, or a relic. At its core, it is all extremely basic, and anyone looking for some cool interactions or synergies to exploit some interesting weapon effect or some inventive builds is going to be disappointed. Time to talk about some of the bugs I encountered to give you a little bit of an impression on this game in its current state and how it launched. First of all, the launch itself was pretty much a disaster. People couldn't log in, everyone got disconnected, and it caused the Steam review rating to go down hard. The game is currently sitting at 38% user rating on Steam, overwhelmingly negative. However, claiming that this is only because of a rocky launch isn't entirely correct either. I mean, you're halfway through the review by now, you should have some idea that this isn't great. Even when the game runs, it's not a great game, let's be honest. If you're expecting a Torchlight game, and you should, given the title of this product, you're simply going to be disappointed in this dumbed down version. Once in the game, I encountered numerous bugs as well. My movement skills teleported me under the floor in a boss fight, leaving me unable to move, and I had to log out the game and restart. More than once, my town portal teleported me to a random zone. More than once, the portal to my fort teleported me to a random zone. More than once, I ended up in someone else's fort when I selected a map with a quest in it, and the other way around happened too, with random strangers appearing in my maps. Those weren't incidents, but very common issues. The game is online and suffers from lag. Combat is not fluent to begin with, even if this game was offline, but on the EU servers I experienced significant lag during boss fights. Bosses ran out of sync, sometimes appearing in random spots in the boss arenas. Their charging abilities were all over the place because of desync. Quite painful, especially if you have that nice shiny lifebound gear equipped. You could argue that this is early access and it will be fixed. I won't dispute that, I'm just describing the current state of the game. And with this in mind, let's look ahead at the future. The devs stated they want to release Torchlight 3 this year. It is therefore pretty safe to assume that most of the game mechanics won't change, because there's no way you can change all these shallow mechanics or add depth in just a few months. What is being added is endgame, although we don't know what or how. Contracts, which are basically bounties, make their return once Act 3 is implemented, and Act 3 is still coming. Apart from that, there's not much exciting stuff on the horizon. There aren't really many reasons to believe this game will be improved a lot before it hits the shelves later this year. This game has had a very troubled development road to get to early access, and apparently its suffering hasn't ended just yet, given the current Steam rating that the game most likely will not recover from. Unfortunately, the Steam user rating is pretty accurate if you add, let's say, 10% to the score to balance from all the negative reviews caused by the horrible launch, because this game has one huge problem. It won't please a lot of Torchlight fans, as these have come to expect a much more refined game with more depth, skills, customization and stuff to do. Torchlight 3 doesn't even feature half of what its predecessors managed to pull off almost a decade ago. It won't please a lot of action RPG fans either, because there are so many other games available at the same price range that are infinitely better. Basically any other action RPG game, ranging from the free-to-play Path of Exile to early access last Epoch for 30-ish euros, to fully released Diablo 3 for 40 euros, to Grim Dawn for a bargain of 18 bucks or something silly like that. All these games are similarly priced and offer so much more. Finally, it won't please the free-to-play players or potentially even mobile markets because it's not free-to-play anymore. The design patterns of free-to-play games are still very prevalent in Torchlight 3, however, with bite-sized maps, short missions, an emphasis on the customization of the fort and decorations, simplistic UI, and the lack of interesting gameplay elements. There's just not much of a market left to sell this game to. Only people that have never played an action RPG could have some fun over here. It's nice to get a complete rookie into the genre, but is it enough? I seriously doubt it. Once again, I didn't hate playing the game, but it is sad to play a Torchlight game where even the potential is hard to spot. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed the review, ladies and gentlemen, and found it useful. Thanks for watching and making it to the end. See you all soon. Bye bye.